If you have homeschooled for any length of time, whether it's a few years, a few months, a few weeks, maybe even just 5 minutes, or you have just happened to mention that you're thinking about homeschooling in the future, there are a couple of responses that as homeschool parents we tend to get quite often. So today I'm going to share with you 6 things not to say to the homeschool parent. Before we get started, I'm Leigh and welcome to my channel. I am really excited that you are here. Right here on this channel, I share about homeschooling, our reasons why, just behind the scenes, kind of how that looks, tips and tricks about curriculum, just all the things that it comes to homeschooling. If you have not already and would like to, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Now let's get started on today's video. Real quick, if you are thinking about homeschooling and you stumbled upon this video, or maybe you've been homeschooling for a little while, suddenly pulled your kids out, wasn't expected, or you've been thinking about it for a while, but you kind of feel like you're a little bit drowning in what to do with homeschool, let me know. There is a link down below in the description below if you would like to get in on my homeschool coaching program. This is a program that I walk new homeschool parents or newish homeschool parents right through the entire process. Just a step-by-step process to get you up and running and thriving in your homeschool. Basically a homeschool plan that's built for you. Let me know if you'd like more information about that. Let's dive into the 6 things not to say to a homeschool parent. This list is in no particular order. However, let's start with number 1, with one that most likely everybody has heard multiple times, whether you have a young child or an older child, and it's the bad S word when it comes to homeschool families. So the word is, now it's a long S word, so I should probably say that, and it is the word socialization. We will hear this one like, well, what about socialization? How are you going to socialize your kids? What are you going to do for socialization for your children? All right, I'm hoping here not to get myself into trouble. We're just gonna kind of wing it here and see where this goes. But forced association is not socialization. I'm gonna leave it up to you to kind of fill in the blanks on that one. However, when it comes to socialization, this honestly is like the least of my concerns. Most homeschool families have to purposely put some parameters around their lives so that they don't socialize too much. Also, I went to public school and I pretty much remember being told to stop socializing. I remember getting into trouble saying, this is not when we socialize. This is not a place for socialization. And suddenly, like, the tables have been flipped and we have this idea, this concept that school, public or private school system, is where kids get socialized. When you put a bunch of kids that are all the same age together in a classroom, that's how they get socialized. Now, some kids thrive just fine in that type of environment. However, when we homeschool, we don't have to socialize in that kind of manner. My kids have had amazing opportunities, and I have been able to watch them and walk through that with them when they have socialized with people. I have been able to give them opportunities to interact with babies, young children, older people. We have volunteered in nursing homes. We have done a lot of different things to expose them to people of various ages. And to me, socialization is being able to be yourself, to be able to carry on a conversation that allows the other person to feel good about themselves and be able to engage in a variety of different topics. Now, I am going to tell you a story here. My daughter a few years ago was probably in middle school, maybe early high school age. And we were somewhere and someone was asking her all about, kind of about homeschool and just all kinds of things. I could overhear the conversation and they talked for at least 5 minutes, and it wasn't about the weather. It wasn't silly, fluffy stuff. It was about, a lot of different subjects. The conversation flowed very naturally. So the conversation ended, my daughter, walked away, and this person came over to me, and honestly, I don't remember who it was anymore, but I do remember the conversation, which is maybe a good thing I don't remember who it is. But they said to me, so your daughter tells me that you guys homeschool. And I was like, yeah. She's like, so aren't you concerned about socialization? I was absolutely shocked, because at that point, I think I really began to realize and understand what our society, what our culture considers socialization, and not what socialization actually is. My daughter, as a young teen, was having a conversation with a 40-plus-year-old woman and, was having eye contact, and they were very engaged, and they seemed to both be enjoying the conversation. And this person did not view that as being socialized. To me, that is being socialized. Also, let's add the fact that not everybody is very social, and that's okay. I kind of remember there being some non-social, antisocial people with me in school. I mean, I can look around my neighborhood, I can go to the grocery store, and I can find people very easily that were antisocial, just not very social people, and that's fine. That's their personality. And I can almost guarantee that they were not homeschooled. So we have to understand that there's different personalities and not to assume that they're going to have difficulty socializing. Again, a family can decide how social they want to be and how much they want to kind of just be on their own. And as a child, as you get older and out into the world, if your family was, I don't want to say antisocial, but a little more of introverts, go ahead, and you're an extrovert, then you have the option to go ahead and be an extrovert after that point. Don't let that hold you back. I guess people are just concerned that the kids are going to be super weird and they're going to be hermits. They're not going to know how to talk to anybody. But again, being able to just talk to kids of your own age that were born within maybe possibly a few years of you, and one, maybe two adults, you know, here and there, multiple adults that you just see day in and day out. To me, socialization really, like showing that someone is socialized, is that they can interact with a variety of people, variety of ages, variety of demographics, all the things. So to me, socialization, when somebody says that, it just tells me that they don't quite fully understand what socialization is. They haven't looked up the definition, haven't really thought about it. It's also just a really easy thing to just kind of spit out. So when somebody says to me, I've had multiple times when like a mom who wants to homeschool will contact me, you know, through Instagram and say, you know, I really want to homeschool. My husband is worried about socialization. I always say to them, ask your husband what his specific concerns are. What is he really concerned? What is the heart of the matter? And, you know, so ask it in a way that, you know, really you do want to know what the answer is. And it's also a way to get the person kind of thinking about it, because it can kind of just be like a overall sort of excuse possibly. I have never had a mom come back to me with any good solid reason. And it always has led to, they've told me that's led to a great conversation by saying, so what is it that you're really concerned about? What do you think they're gonna miss out on as far as socializing? And they've had a really good conversation and came to the realization that that really wasn't a concern. If you have something that you want your kids to get involved in and in a certain way you want them to socialize, you can always find it as a homeschooler. Number 2 on our 6 things not to say to a homeschool parent is when you meet a family and you meet the kids and you kind of get to, okay, so let me preface this with, this typically happens with younger children, elementary school age. I remember this happening a lot to my kids when they were younger, but as they've gotten older, no one has ever done this to them because it just seemed, it's silly. It's silly for them to do it, but they can kind of get away with it when the kids are younger, but kind of getting down, you know, down to their level and saying, so little Johnny, what's 2 times 2? What's the capital of New Mexico? When was this certain war or battle happened? Like, so basically number 2 is grilling a homeschool child on facts and information. And as a homeschool parent, you kind of start to groan about it. You're like, really? You're going to start grilling them because, okay, I would love to say to somebody who would, and I didn't have the guts, let's just say when I didn't have the guts when my kids were younger, I wasn't confident enough in my homeschooling, and I also don't want to come across as being rude, but it's kind of secretly now in the back of my mind, I want to be like, do you do that to public school kids? Do you start grilling them on their math facts, on their geography, on their history? No, they don't do that because they assume that the kids are getting the education that they need in the public or private school. And this is a way of testing to see if they are getting the proper education that they should be getting as, you know, as they determine to be the proper education. I also kind of took a bit of offense to it because to me it was a way of them checking on whether or not I am doing a good enough job. Good enough as per the standards that they are used to and comfortable with. So I think this ties into that just comfort. Like, it just feels comfortable to be able to know that a child knows this certain information without taking into account sometimes their age. You know, they'll have like a little child, they're grilling them on the capitals of different states and the kid's like 5 and they're like, I don't know. To me, it's just is another way for a person from outside the homeschool circle to kind of test to see if, you know, they're learning things. And sometimes, honestly, with some of these things, people don't know how to respond. They don't know what to say when you mention that you are homeschooling. So their kind of go-to would be to, you know, grill your kids, drill them on some different facts and stuff. The third thing not to say to a homeschool parent is, now this one usually is something that is said when you first start off homeschooling. Now, this is my 11th year of homeschooling. I rarely get these, but I feel like I don't know, maybe I just have a little bit, I don't want to say like I have like a mean homeschool mom look, but I just kind of, I feel like maybe I have like a don't mess with me kind of homeschool mom look to my face that people don't say anything. Plus, my kids are older. People can easily see the fruits of homeschooling and they don't come up with these things. Okay, so let's go to number 3. Number 3 would be some type of phrase or a question regarding the qualifications of the parents, specifically usually moms, because typically moms are doing most of the formal education, the homeschooling. So checking on the qualifications of them. Are you qualified to do that? How are you qualified to do that? Don't you have to be a teacher? Don't you have to have a certification? How can it be that just you as a parent can homeschool? I'm like, these are my children. Whether you have given birth to them or adopted them, like they are yours. You have the right to educate your children. And we have gotten so far away in our country, in our society, in our culture, from the belief that parents have much to teach their children. They have a lot to teach their children. And I have the privilege of working with some amazing families. If you are interested in my homeschool program, let me know. I'd love to be able to walk you through this and get you to feeling like you are qualified. Because I think that sometimes as homeschool parents, we can even think, how are we even qualified? But every single state in the United States allows for parents to homeschool. The state, okay, that's a whole nother video going into that. But let's just say that the state says that you are qualified simply by being their parent. Some states have certain qualifications, such as needing to have your high school diploma or GED. Some states want you to have a certain amount of college credits, or you need to take some type of, class or something. So there are some hoops to jump through in some of the states. But for the most part, just the fact that this is your child, they are legally yours, and you are legally responsible for them, you legally can educate them. You don't need a teaching certificate, a degree, or anything like that when it comes to teaching. When people go to school to become a teacher, they learn a lot of how to manage a classroom of 30 kids. You are not going to be managing a classroom of 30 kids. You don't need to write lesson plans. You don't need to follow certain lesson plans. It can be one-on-one or 1 to 4 or 1 to 10, depending on how many kids you have in your family. But number 3 is, how are you qualified? And to answer that can be a little bit hard. You can say something like, oh, the state says I'm qualified just for being their parent. Or you could say something like, I'm not really worried about that. Or, oh, I'm just really excited about homeschooling. Just anything that kind of deflects. So let's go back. I forgot to go into that. I'm sorry. For the socialization part, like, how do you respond? My go-to response when somebody says something to me about socialization, be like, well, aren't you concerned about socialization? And because that's usually the way that people have phrased it to me. I say, no, I'm not. And then I just am silent. And the person's like, okay. That just kind of ends the conversation because they asked me an honest question. Are you concerned about socialization? And I'm not. So I just replied that no, I'm not. For the second one, when people are maybe like grilling your kids on their math facts or whatever it is, I usually have kind of caught the eye of my kids and I've kind of talked to them about it. They know it. They knew it would happen here and there. I would just kind of catch their eye and, smile, and they would just kind of repeat what they knew or just not answer them just in a polite way or something like that. And oftentimes if it was more than 1 or 2 questions, I would step in and, just kind of deflect the situation and change the course of the conversation, find out if they had any other questions about homeschooling besides that, just to kind of get my kids off the hook. And then I would talk to them later on about, why the person did that, and which was really good for my kids to become, compassionate and just kind of understanding of why people were doing that, and not to, I didn't want them to be rude to the person, because as homeschoolers, we get to educate people on homeschooling. We get to show them what a homeschooling family looks like. So I kind of feel like we are to, be a good witness for our homeschooling so that people's minds are changed about it. And I think that as more families homeschool, a lot can change for the good in our culture and society. Okay, let's jump back to our list. Number 4 on the list is, it'll go something like this. Again, this is something that you'll get when your kids are younger. I don't get it anymore because I have older kids and have proven that this question is doesn't make any sense to them to ask my kids. But it's something like, well, you're going to put them back in school when they get older, right? Or, oh, you'll definitely get them back in school for high school. Usually it is phrased as a rhetorical question. It is more of a statement. It's more of them sharing their thoughts, their feelings, and their convictions, or just Sometimes it is their discomfort in the thought that possibly you might homeschool all the way through because of their own, maybe their own feelings, their own insecurities when it comes to or lack of understanding of homeschooling. So you will get this sometimes like, well, aren't you going to put them, or you're back in school for later years, or you're going to put them back in school when they get older, right? And in the back of your mind, you know, you're like, no, I am in this for the long haul. But you don't really quite know how to phrase it. There's a couple of, I mean, again, this depends upon your personality, how aggressive and how abrasive you want to be. You can easily deflect from some of these situations, just change the conversation. Different responses you could give. One of them could be like, well, we're going to take it year by year. That one right there gets everybody, they don't say anything after that because they feel like, oh, okay, good. Like that feels like something that they are comfortable with. If you are firmly convicted, like we are homeschooling all the way, you can be like, no, we don't plan on doing that. And that's fine too. People don't usually know how to respond to such a thing. But my kind of go-to was like, we'll evaluate every single year. But like in the back of my mind, I was like, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we've evaluated. They're going all the way through. So I have graduated my oldest. I have an 11th grader and an 8th grader. If you didn't catch, I shared the curriculum for my 8th grader just recently in my last video, so you can go over and hop back to that if you're interested in seeing what he's doing as a middle schooler this year. Number 5 on the list of 6 things not to say to a homeschool parent is, how do you know what to teach them? Because we are so used to, you know, a teacher has lesson plans and basically a lot of the stuff that, I mean, a teacher can have lesson plans, but a lot of it comes down from the state as to what needs to be taught. So they're told exactly like how, you know, what they need to teach and how long it needs to be taught for. So it feels very uncomfortable to people like, how do you know what to teach? Now there are some books out there that will say what your child needs to know in 2nd grade, what your child needs to know in 5th grade, what your child needs to know in 10th grade. And when I first started out homeschooling, I was very much into those books. Our budget was so small that I couldn't add to like those to my collection to keep for myself. So I'd borrow them from the library. But actually I'm thankful that I was not able to purchase those because I probably would have spent too much time trying to make sure my homeschool looked like what those books said. Now those might be a great guideline. If you're just starting out for homeschooling, it might be a good guideline. I'm not telling you that you don't like not to look at those, but I'm kind of telling you not to look at those and not to worry about those. If you were to choose a curriculum, if your child is say in 3rd grade and you chose a math curriculum that said 3rd grade, you can kind of pretty much assume that that's about what they should be learning in 3rd grade. Now, I do remember my daughter when I first started homeschooling her, she was in 3rd grade. And I was asking some questions of a friend of hers that was still in public school. Well, I was asking the mom some questions or maybe looking, I don't remember the exact circumstance, but I kind of found out of a couple of things in language arts that that we hadn't learned yet. And I started to panic. I wanted to throw in, you know, so I'm like, well, maybe we won't cover this. Maybe, you know, she has to know this by the end of 3rd grade. And so I tried to find some resources, probably grabbed some workbooks that I didn't need to do. If you didn't see my video about things that, I have a couple of videos about what I regret doing and what I don't do in my homeschool. I can drop those in the description below. You can check out those. I included that about just busy work and stuff like that. But I just kind of felt like, oh no, she's not going to get this stuff. So I threw that stuff in. It didn't fit in very well with the rest of the stuff, but I just panicked that she wasn't going to know this by the end of that grade. Turns out, as we worked through the language arts, you know, program that I had purchased, we got to that. And we covered it. Just because it didn't happen in January, like maybe her friend was introduced to it, by February or March, she was introduced to it. So I think if you are concerned about like, what is my child supposed to learn, especially for the first couple of years of homeschooling, you know, if you stick to things that are grade appropriate, you're going to cover those things. If you are a more seasoned homeschooler, or as you become more a seasoned homeschooler, you don't necessarily worry about those things so much. But a common response or a question that people will give homeschool parents is like, how do you know what to teach? So there's a couple of different ways you can answer. Like, well, we have a curriculum. You know, that could, to whatever degree, where you have a box curriculum, or maybe you just picked out one book somewhere. You know, you don't have to give the details. You just say, then, well, we're just following a curriculum. That makes people feel better. Now, if the person who is making these statements, I know we didn't get to number 6 yet, I promise, we won't miss number 6, but if the person making these statements is, say, a grandparent, a relative, a really close friend, understand that they are probably coming from a place of concern for your child. And so don't take offense to it. Take it as like they are concerned, they love your child, and they just are not familiar with what homeschooling looks like. They're concerned that your child is not going to be equipped for, you know, the rest of their life. You know that they will be, so just I would say at least in the very beginning, maybe even a few years, until they start to see that your child is thriving and doing well and they are socialized, they're not weird, that they are progressing and nothing crazy or weird has happened, I would say just let it go. I know that it can be, especially if it's somebody close to you who just continually is saying things, I know it can be hard because it hurts your heart as a homeschool parent, especially, you know, homeschool mom. Most of you are homeschool moms that I'm talking to. I know that it hurts your heart because you know that you are putting so much effort into this. You have given up a lot to be able to educate your child at home and to spend all this time, whether it is you left a job or you've left just, you know, you don't have as much free time as you would have. You've, you know, stopped doing other things, maybe budget-wise, whatever it is, you know that you have sacrificed a lot and you know in your heart that you are just working so hard to homeschool your children, and somebody, every time you see them, has some type of negative comment or some kind of remark. I know that it can hurt. Don't let that hold you back. Continue to homeschool, and in the back of your mind, if you have like a personality like me, like my personality is like, I'm gonna show you. Like when people say things like this to me, it did not make me want to put my kids back in school. It made my resolve, it made my why, it made my conviction so much stronger. Whereas I think sometimes people making comments like this, especially if it's close family or friends, then, you know, they kind of think like, well, maybe by them asking questions, you're going to change your mind. But if you're anything like me, maybe you are. And if you're not, like, maybe kind of try to alter your view on it and be like, this is making me even more resolved because I'm going to show this person that we're going to do this all the way through and my kid's going to turn out fantastic. Number 6 on the list of what not to say to a homeschool parent is this statement. I get this a lot. Well, I guess maybe not as much. Again, my kids are older and people have kind of stopped making comments, but for many years, and I know that all of you have gotten this before. And typically it comes from a friend or somebody possibly the same age as us, or at least has children that are the same age or around, or raising, usually it's that they're still raising children, and they will say something like this: oh, I could never homeschool. And the selfish part of me goes to, you asked me about what I was doing, and I answered your question, and I told you we have decided to homeschool, and now you're talking about yourself. So we know that everybody loves to talk about themselves. It's very easy to talk about yourself. It's comfortable. I is my favorite subject. For you, it is the same thing. It's very easy to talk about ourselves. We all want to talk about ourselves. So I would sometimes get frustrated by that. I'm like, we weren't talking about you. But I just kind of allowed that. I got to the point where I would allow them to bring it to themselves, and that would be absolutely fine. And I would continue that by focusing on them and say, well, you never know what'll happen. You know, or I would say something like, you know, I said the same exact thing because I really did. And I feel bad about my friend that was homeschooling. The one friend I had that was homeschooling when I started homeschooling, I said it to her multiple times, like, oh, I could never homeschool. And I look back now and I'm like, I'm sorry. Susan, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. You know, because it's just, God brought me to a place that I was like, okay, I will do this. So before that point, you know, I really did think, honestly, like I could never homeschool. Mostly I didn't know what it was, but I was just like, I don't have the patience for it. I don't have all of these different skills that I just thought magically these homeschool moms had. Didn't quite think that they actually grow in those areas. You grow in patience, you grow in understanding and compassion. So a common response people will say was like, oh, I could never do that. So my response that I would suggest for you to give to them is like, well, you never know, or hey, you know, things come up, or, you know, well, I used to say the same thing, or if you just don't even want to say anything, just smile. Just smile and give no response, because sometimes it's hard as to know what to say to that situation. Typically, again, this is somebody who has a child that's school age. This is just a guess, and I feel like by you, and I kind of from my own experience, I kind of felt like when I was telling people that we were going to homeschool, that they felt that I was judging them and their decision to continue with their kids in the school system that we were pulling our kids out of. So by saying like, oh, I could never do that, it is a way, it is a safety net maybe for people to be able to feel like what they are doing is okay. Like, well, you could do that. You decided that you could do that, but I couldn't, so I'm not going to. And by you saying that you're going to homeschool, it challenges that a little bit in their mind, and it's hard to go to that spot. When my friend would talk about homeschooling, it was hard for me to go to that spot until suddenly it wasn't hard. And I remember just being convicted of homeschooling. It was something always in the back of my mind. If you want me to talk more about my story, I can. Let me know in the comment section below. But I just remember feeling like, the way we are living isn't right for our family. And when I decided to homeschool, like I was on fire, so excited about it. There you have it. The 6 things not to say to a homeschool parent. Number 1, what are you gonna do about socialization? Number 2, hey little Johnny, what's 2 times 2? Hey little Johnny, what's the capital of Kansas? So grilling kids on information and facts. Number 3, how are you qualified to teach your own children? Number 4, and my personal favorite, aren't you gonna put them back in school when they're older, or you are gonna put them back in school when they're older, right? Number 5, how do you know what to teach them? And number 6, I could never homeschool. Let me know in the comment section, at least from these, which ones you have gotten and how do you respond. It's really important for us as homeschool parents to be aware of different types of comments and questions and things that we're going to encounter, because the more that you are aware of those and that you rehearse, you know, different answers as to what fits your personality, the more confident and comfortable we'll feel. We won't be caught off guard. It'll just roll off your tongue what your response is to it. So aren't you concerned about socialization? No, I'm not. Like very quickly that would just kind of come out because I knew that that was a response that fit my personality. I knew it would kind of diffuse the situation and we could move on to a different part of the conversation. I hope today's video has been helpful for you. If you have not already, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.